Hello, everyone, and welcome back to English Boost. I'm Mary. Today, I'll tell you a story about a rainy day in the city. Listen carefully and try to shadow me. That means repeat what I say at the same time. Ready? Let's start. Last Tuesday morning, I was slowly pulled from sleep by a soft, persistent tapping against my bedroom window. For a few moments, I lay still under my warm blanket, listening to the delicate rhythm of raindrops. Eventually, I pushed the covers aside and walked to the window. I pulled back the thin curtain and looked outside. The sky was a smooth blanket of gray, with no hint of blue or sunlight. The rooftops of the neighboring buildings were dark and wet, and the streets below gleamed like polished stone. I could see tiny rivers of water running along the gutters, carrying small leaves and petals. Down on the pavement, a few early risers hurried past, their umbrellas turning the street into a moving painting of black, red, and yellow shapes. The whole scene felt muted, as if the rain had turned the volume of the city down. I stood there for a long time, just breathing in the cool air that seeped through the window frame. Then, an unexpected feeling of adventure stirred inside me. Instead of staying indoors with a book, I decided I would wrap up well and step directly into that wet, whispering world. I dressed quickly, choosing a thick sweater and my bright yellow raincoat, which always lifted my spirits. I found my old black umbrella in the closet, its handle worn smooth by many rainy days before. As I opened the front door, a fresh, damp gust of wind greeted me, carrying the green smell of wet leaves and the mineral scent of damp concrete. I stepped onto the doorstep and carefully opened the umbrella with a soft whoosh. The rain was not heavy. It was a steady, gentle drizzle that created a comforting sound as it hit the fabric above me. I took my first steps onto the sidewalk, feeling the cool water seep slightly through the seams of my leather boots. The neighborhood looked different. Ordinary houses and fences now seemed softer. I paused to watch a small bird shaking water from its feathers under a bush. Everything felt calm and unhurried. With no particular destination in mind, I turned left at the corner and headed towards the old city center, eager to see how the rain had transformed familiar streets. The main street was nearly empty, which was unusual for a weekday morning. A red double-decker bus passed me, its wheels sending a fine spray of water that glittered for a second before falling. I walked past a row of shops with steamed-up windows. Behind the glass, I could see the blurry shapes of customers, sipping coffee and reading newspapers. The neon sign of an old cinema flickered, its pink and blue light reflecting beautifully on the wet asphalt. I noticed how the rain seemed to magnify every color: the red of a postbox, the green of a street sign, the yellow of a passing taxi. Up ahead, a father and his young daughter were jumping together in a large puddle, their laughter ringing out clear and joyful. The little girl's rain boots were bright purple, and she clapped her hands every time the water splashed. I couldn't help but smile. I continued walking, listening to the very music of the rain, the plinking on metal shop awnings, the drumming on car roofs, and the soft hiss of tires on wet roads. The air smelled of fried food from a nearby bakery and the deep, earthy perfume of soaked trees. After turning down a narrow side street, I came across a place I had never noticed before, a tiny second-hand bookshop squeezed between a tailor and a closed antique store. Its window display was a charming mess of old hardcovers, their spines faded to shades of brown and gold. The glass was fog, and someone had drawn a smiley face in the condensation. A warm yellow light glowed from inside. I folded my umbrella, pushed the heavy wooden door, and a little brass bell jingled overhead. The moment I stepped in, a delightful smell of old paper, dust, and faintly of cinnamon tea wrapped around me. The shop was narrow but stretched far back, with towering shelves that seemed to lean slightly from the weight of their books. An old man with a neat white beard and round glasses sat behind a cluttered wooden counter. He looked up from a thick novel and smiled. I whispered a hello, not wanting to break the quiet spell of the room. The sound of rain on the shop's tin roof filled the silence with a gentle, steady beat, as if the whole place was inside a giant drum. The bookseller introduced himself as Arthur. He had a kind, quiet voice and the sort of eyes that seemed to have read as many stories as his shelves held. When he saw my damp coat, he immediately offered me a cup of tea from a small electric kettle behind the counter. I accepted, and we began to talk. He told me that the shop had belonged to his grandfather, and that he had spent his own childhood rainy days, exactly like this one, hidden among the books while the world outside poured. As he spoke, he gestured to a worn armchair by the window. "That's the best spot to listen to the rain," he said. I chose a collection of short stories by a local author I had never heard of and settled into the chair. The fabric was soft and threadbare. I wrapped my hands around the hot cup and took a sip of the sweet cinnamon tea. For the next hour, I read and listened to the rain tap dancing on the glass. The city, with all its noise and hurry, felt a million miles away. It was one of those rare, perfect moments when time simply stops. A gentle stillness told me the rain had stopped. I looked up from my book and saw that the sky outside the window had brightened. The heavy gray clouds were breaking apart, and thin rays of late afternoon sunlight were beginning to touch the wet streets. I thanked Arthur, bought the book, and promised to return. As I stepped outside, the air was astonishingly fresh, washed clean of all dust and noise. The pavement was still dark with moisture, but puddles were now golden mirrors reflecting the softening sky. The streetlights blinked on one by one, casting long reflections that shimmered like jewels. I decided to take the long way home. Cars moved more quietly, their tires no longer hissing. A man walked his dog, the dog shaking water from its fur and sending a little rainbow of couplets into the air. I paused on a small bridge over a canal, watching the water below, still dappled by the last raindrops. The whole scene was so calm that I didn't want to go home. The city felt new, as if it had just been born from the rain. By the time I reached my front door, the city was fully lit under the darkening sky. I shook the remaining drops from my umbrella and hung my raincoat on the hook in the hallway. The house felt warm and safe, a cozy contrast to the damp outdoors. I made myself another cup of tea and sat by my own window, looking out at the twinkling lights of the neighborhood. The rain had washed away the usual grayness, leaving everything crisp and bright. I thought about my unexpected adventure, the bookstore, the kind Arthur, the laughing child, and the golden puddles. A rainy day in the city had turned into one of the most peaceful and memorable days I'd had in a long time. The occasional drip from the eaves punctuated the silence like a slow metronome. I traced the worn cover of my new book, already feeling a deep affection for it. I realized that sometimes the best days are the ones without plans, when you let the weather guide you. With a happy sigh, I opened the book and started reading again, while the last echoes of the rain dripped gently from the roof, and the city fell into a quiet slumber. That's the end of the story. Keep practicing your shadowing. It's a great way to improve your pronunciation and fluency. See you next time.